Hey everybody, welcome back to The Bearded Hobbit. Today we're going to make a fermenter box. This is a box in which you place your fermented items, or rather what you're brewing, and you're doing this to try to keep it at a stable temperature. I live in the South. It is the summertime, and so we don't have those nice cool temperatures that we would normally have in the winter or even the spring or the fall. The problem with brewing is that if your yeast get too warm, at least certain species, they will make some bad smelling chemicals. You'll get some funkiness in your cider or whatever it is that you're brewing. I'm brewing cider and I'm trying to get some ready for the fall. And so what we're gonna do is we're gonna build this box out of the styrofoam that you see back here. This is a polystyrene foam. I've got 1 inch here, but if you look online, if you type in DIY Fermentor Box, if you type in, I think it's called like Son of Fermentation, something like that. It's essentially just a box that you're able to put your brew in my case, some hard apple cider. I'll be using these 1 gallon jugs, so I'm gonna build specifically to that one. And you put ice in it. So let's say you freeze a gallon of water into ice, and that keeps it at a much lower temperature. Now, in Texas, in the summertime, houses can get pretty warm. Unless you want a huge electric bill to try to keep everything cold, you probably keep your temperatures a little bit higher. So the coldest room in my house is probably around 74 degrees, which is quite nice. But you know, some people I know, 65 degrees year round. But if you do that, your electric bill, hopefully you've got really good insulation if that's the case, but your electric bill would be astronomical. So in order to try to keep my temperatures down, that's what we're going to build today. I'm going to walk you guys through my build. I will post the dimensions that I use down below in the description, so if you want to build one the same size, you can go for that. I'm going for minimal. I'm going for small, so that everything just kind of fits. As I said, I usually brew 1 gallon at a time. I've actually got 2 gallons that I can do, so I'm going to build specifically to that. So 2 1-gallon brewing vessels. Some people use 5-gallon buckets or 2-gallon buckets. You're going to have to kind of go off of this plan and ramp it up. There are other plans online, so please go check those out if some of those suit you a little bit better. So let's get into the build. Let me show you though, before we get started, let me show you all the things that I'm going to use to kind of put this thing together. I'm going to use, of course, 1 inch foam. I am not going to glue it together. I'm actually going to use just some nails to punch through it to hold it in place. And then I'm going to seal it with duct tape around the edges. The reason I'm going this route to seal it off is so that if I do need to break it down, all I need to do is cut the tape and I can take the whole thing apart. If I glue it, I can't take it apart. I have to break everything and start all the way back over. Now, this next part, this is a thermostat. You don't necessarily have to have this one. I've seen some builds where they use it, other builds where they don't. This is just a cheap programmable thermostat from Lowe's. And so part of this design is to use a fan, which I've got to go dig it out, but it's a small computer fan that will turn based on the temperature, right? So this is basically just going to turn the fan on and off based on the temperature. And what that's going to do is move the cold air from the ice over to the fermenting vessels, the bottles. And so you'll see that once we kind of get into the process of this, why this might be something to kind of check in on. I'm sure you can find maybe cheaper ones or similar ones on Amazon for about the same price. I've got my plans, I've got my apple juice and everything ready to go. Whenever I'm done with this, we can get that started. But here's the basics. So super simple, super easy, nothing too crazy. All right, so I've got my measurements. I figured them out as to what size I want to build. I'm building to the smallest size I can to fit my 2 gallons of fermenting goodness and 2 gallons of frozen water, if I need 2 water bottles that are frozen. And enough room to create a dividing wall. As we said, we'll kind of get into that a little bit later on. The key part here is going to be cutting straight lines, because you want this insulation to fit against each other as closely and tightly as possible. Any waving or anything like that is just opening gaps for air to escape. We're trying to create as much as we can kind of a closed system because we're simply just using ice to cool it down. So just like a nice Yeti cooler, creating a good thick layer of insulation and then trapping it in there, the ice stays much longer, everything stays colder. Now, I'm getting away probably with a 1-inch insulation because this is going to go in an air-conditioned space. It's going to go underneath my stairs where it's like 74 degrees. So I really only need, at most 10 degrees below ambient. Probably not even that. Because I think I need to hit somewhere around 69 to 70 for my yeast, right? So I'm almost there anyway in the house. If you plan on doing this in the basement, which I see a lot of people do, you can get 2 inches from some of your big box stores. I went to Lowe's, they didn't have 2-inch, but Home Depot does have 2-inch. It is more expensive. This, I think, cost me 20 bucks. So I'm going a little cheap, but again, it's going out of the way. So if your wife is okay with that, or your spouse, stick inside the house, you can get away a little bit cheaper. If it has to be hidden, or you're sneaking some brewing going on, you might want to opt for the 2-inch. Okay, so just make sure that you get your edges straight, and when you cut this straight. I'm going to be using a jigsaw to cut this so that I don't screw it up trying to use a razor blade and getting my angles all kinds of wrong. I want to take a quick moment just kind of point out something that I'm doing here. I'm measuring out my pieces that I have, and I'm actually not butting them up to each other so that I have a little bit of space to cut, since it's going to cut, maybe 1/8 of an inch off. And that can add up over time if you're constantly cutting 1/8 off. So here is my dividing wall, okay? So here's what's gonna happen with this wall. I am gonna have to cut some airflow vents here and here. That's the next step, but I wanted to measure all this before I get to that point. This chamber will house my 2 1-gallon. I know it looks small. It'll completely fit, not a concern. And then over here, we'll fit 2 1-gallon frozen water jugs over here. I'll be mounting that thermostat probably right here in this corner, so that whenever the air temperature drops, or rather it increases, I can cause this fan to turn on, blow that cooler air in here to cause the temperature to drop back down. Most of my fermentations, I'm done with cider, in about a week. It's pretty much done by then. So this will be plenty. It'll be, changing it out maybe every couple of days. I think it'll be perfectly fine. So I'm going to finish putting this together, and then I will show you it completed. Okay, we are just about done. The only thing I really have left to do is I need to tape off all the seams. As I mentioned before, if you're going to glue this and make it permanent, that's probably the easiest way to do it. I'm making this small. If I need to break it down for whatever reason, I can with tape. Maybe I'll move to gluing it later on, but right now I'm going to see how this works. So let me give you the quick rundown on this. I've gone ahead and wired up the timer and the fan. I'll show you that in just 1 second. Okay, so as we said before, we have 2 different areas in the box. This is the cold area where I'm going to store my frozen water jugs. This is where my fermentation is going to be going on. When the thermostat kicks on, it's going to push air from here in here to create little eddies and then blow out a hole I have over here. I'm going to show that to you into this area to cool it down. Okay. Let me bring the camera so that you can see what I've got going on. I do have a lid for this that fits down into this. But you can see here, let me get us closer. Maybe get a different angle. All right, so you can see we've got the fermentation area here, fan pushing air, cool air comes out here. Now, if you're saying, well, why wouldn't you put this window further down? Because you need this to create a dam down here, right? Otherwise, you're not going to be able to keep a temperature. All that cold air is going to come in here no matter what. And that might drop your temperature too low depending on what you're trying to, what you're trying to brew. And again, if you're here and you're like, but just use a different yeast. Yes, there are high temperature yeast that I can use, but you get different flavors from those, right? Every yeast is different. There's certain yeast I'm trying that I want cooler temperatures. So, cool box. Now this hole may or may not be big enough. I'm assuming it's gotta be. It's just, it'll take a little bit longer to cool down because not as much air is gonna be coming out, but I think that's fine. It's not gonna be creating any problems with the fan. Okay, so let's go over to the workbench and I'll break down what I've got set up here on this part, because this is probably the most complicated part, but I've got an easier solution for you if this isn't comfortable for you. All right, so let's talk about this thermostat, what I've got set up. 2 solutions. This one is a simple, if you have the parts already. I have a power brick here, and I have an old fan from a computer. So I had this laying around, okay? All that I did was I connected it to just a normal home thermostat that's ran off of some batteries, okay? So on this Honeywell, okay, the instructions don't really give you much, but it talks about, if you open this up and you're installing it at your home or whatever, it would give you the color wires, okay? So I'll tell you what I have. On my DC power, because this just changes it from AC to DC output, this is a 12 volt, 750 milliamp. So it's really, really low, perfect for these little bitty fans. Let me see, this one's 12 volt, 0.08 amps, right? So I'm right at it. Actually, it's a little under, so it's perfect. I made this for another project, so it already had together. So here it is, look. There's a bunch of different wires that you will connect if you're doing this for real on your home. All that I did was I put my DC positive, which in this case on mine was red, to the R, and then Y for yellow, which is the AC on, and I put that, okay, on the other side, right? So here's what happened. Power's coming from the brick. Okay, on my red side, the power comes into this, and then it connects out to the red wire going back out here. All this is this light switch, right? So that power is interrupted here until it says on, and then this turns on power to the fan and kicks it on. That's all that we're using this for, okay? So you can see here, I plug it in, the fan starts moving, right? Because it's on. Now the thermostat doesn't know, well, maybe it does, but it doesn't care, like, oh, there's low power coming through or whatever, okay? So you can do it this way. If you don't want to do it this way, okay, there are a couple of other options. There are fans that come with the power source that simply plug into the wall, and there is a light switch. I say a light switch, I'm sorry. It is a outlet that is controlled by a thermostat that you don't have to wire up or anything. So if you can get this part, just a fan and a power source, wherever you want to find that at, You don't have to get one of these home thermometers. You can look on Amazon. I'll see if I can find it, put it down in the description because I have one. And all it does is you put the thermostat inside the box. When the temperature drops by Bluetooth, it tells that outlet to turn on. And then when it gets to a certain temperature, it tells that outlet to turn off. Okay, it's exactly what this does. It's just that this is going to be in, this whole thing's going to be inside. Okay, and I already had this, so I thought, why not? Okay, so this will be mounted inside. I will likely just put it on a little hanger here. I don't need to install it fully. That's kind of silly. It's just gonna, I might even just set it on the ground. It doesn't really matter at this point, okay? I just need it somewhere in that low temperature area, okay? That's it. So I'm gonna install this, tape it up, and call it good. So let's see what that looks like. All right, it is done. Let me give you a few of the pros and cons on this build based on the way that I did it. Because I'm using tape, I am having to deal with some seam issues. The lid is friction fit in here, which for me, I'm perfectly fine by that. I don't need anything extra. I think it's gonna be fine because I'm doing this indoors. And I'm saying that because there's a little bit of a gap here and here and here for infiltration. But because cold air is gonna be denser than the air around it, I should have really good settling of that cooler air in there, and I think I'll be fine. If I was in a garage area, I might try to get this a little bit tighter, or maybe just put another kind of layer on top to try to stop some of the air leakage, okay? But for this purpose, I think this is gonna be perfectly fine. I opted not to come in with some seams, though I'm saving them in case I do. What I mean by that is, if I need to take one of these pieces and stick it underneath to kind of create a flatter surface rather for it to lay on, I could do that, and that would probably decrease some of this airflow. Again, for my purpose, I think we're fine. Here's a lid. Like I said, it's friction fit on there. I'm not going to need to be opening it all that often, maybe once a week, if that. Thermostat is in here. Basically just hanging on the side. I know you can't see that, I'll show you the inside. But I taped off all the seams, as you can see, on top and bottom, or rather sides and bottom. Installed the air flow, which is my little fan here. Bring it closer so you can kind of see what's going on. Okay, so we're all good here. And that's it, real simple. I think we're up and running. You can see from my thermostat, all I did was I just hung it on a nail in there. I'm not even sweating it. So the plan is, when I need to use this, I will pre-chill it by sticking some frozen gallons of water in here, getting that cool, sticking in my fermentation, and then dropping in my other frozen water bottles on this side so that everything is pre-chilled and ready to go. And that's it. I will try to do an update on this. Let's see. I'm gonna try to start a batch, I think, or 2 batches this week. So I will try to put an update at the end of the video if you are curious. Or I'll try to get this video up and then I'll post the update a little bit later on to let you know how that's going. All right, everyone, thanks again. I'll try to put as much as I can down in the description, so if you have questions, please leave them in the comments. I try to get back to all those questions as quickly as I can, though sometimes I don't get those notifications for a couple of days. But there you go. Hopefully this helped everyone understand basically what this looks like and what you're trying to build. I think it's going to work perfect. Like I said, if you're trying to do this in a garage where it's going to be really hot, you're really going to have to kind of finesse this. So I definitely urge building a box that you can glue and a much better seal on top. All right, that's it. Thanks everybody, and I'll see you next time.